I've said it once, and I'll say it again. If it isn't recorded in Prague, then it's just sparkling, technical, complex, symphonic math rock. We can't call it Prague at that point. Luckily, we can do so here, so let's dive in. Roger Waters, This Is Not a Drill, live from Prague. So, this is the latest live album from Roger Waters. He has done a number of shows lately. The last one that he did that I really, really liked was Us and Them, that he released back in 2020, just before lockdown. So he recorded it just before lockdown, and then afterwards he released it. And I honestly love that. Like, if I am being perfectly honest, if I look at all the 4 remaining Pink Floyd artists, I guess 3, Roger Waters has always kind of been on the bottom of the barrel for me in terms of the material outpour. Really love Nick Mason and what he's been doing with the early Pink Floyd stuff. Obviously love David Gilmore, and Rick White stuff is still like really top notch, and I'm glad that Wet Dream was getting a little bit of, you know, a sparkle shine with Steven Wilson. But honestly, with Roger Waters, you know, his last solo record of Is This Life Really What We Want was lukewarm at best, and what he did with The Dark Side of the Moon back in 2023, I think it was a collective sigh of disappointment at that point. But the live shows, let's just talk about the live shows. Us and Them from 2020, I really, really loved. Honestly, loved the 2015 The Wall that Roger Waters did. And even going as far back as like In the Flesh Live from 2000, like his live output has been stellar. Like he always crafts beautiful and amazing bands, and he actually takes the talent of the locals that are from wherever he's touring from. And it synergizes, and you can tell that everybody is playing like at top notch, and everybody loves the music that's going through. They're really sending through a big message of this love and acceptance and tolerance, and I really, really appreciate that. It's just with this one, though, since, you know, I feel like what he did with Us and Them from 2020, it was an astute statement, it had nuance, there was subtlety to it, but also Roger Waters is about as subtle as a jackhammer. So with this one, I feel like a lot of that subtlety and a lot of that nuance is completely gone, right? And I think a lot of that is also just like where we are as a world, you know, between 2020 and 2025. In many ways, things have gotten much, much worse, right? So, like, I understand him kind of doubling down on a lot of his statements, on a lot of his things, and also a lot of things have happened to Roger Waters since then. He's gotten in a little bit of hot water, shall we say, and I want to also mention this right off the get-go before I even talk about the music or anything like that. Like, I agree with Roger Waters within his political statements pretty much 95, if not 99% of the time. The only thing I'll disagree with is the way he goes about and says it, you know? Like, that's where I'm like, there's a thing called nuance, there's a thing called subtlety, you know? And again, Roger Waters and subtlety are, you know, he's about as subtle as a jackhammer. But, you know, there's certain things that I feel like he's kind of missing within the nuance, you know? And again, I'll agree with the principle of what he's talking about and what he's saying. It's like, yeah, what you're saying is all true. It's like all of the presidents of the United States have been war criminals, like without a doubt. Most of the world leaders up until this point are also war criminals. So like, yeah, let's hold them accountable. Let's actually put the brass tacks. Like, the people who need to be held accountable are usually the ones that are getting away scot-free. And those who are being punished or killed are usually those that are just trying to advocate for decent human life. It's like, yeah, I can get on board with all of that. I think all of that is completely fair and completely right and completely justified. Like, absolutely. Everything you're saying is great. Again, I think it's just the way that it's coming about. I'm like, I think there could have been better ways to put that, right? So I just want to get that out right at the beginning, because everything else that I'm going to be talking about is really just like the music that's being found on here, the performance that are being found on here, and not necessarily the messaging, right? Because the messaging that's found on here, as I mentioned, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. There was one moment, though, when he comes out and he's got this piece of paper and he's saying how, you know, the powers that be tried to silence me. They tried to shut this whole thing down, but we are still here and we're still performing. It's like, that's cool, but they actually did cancel a lot of your shows. So again, tact, you know. What else do I need to say about this? I do enjoy the actual selection of music that he's playing on this one. I think he's doing a really good balance between his solo career and his Pink Floyd stuff. Now, I'm not a big fan of his solo career stuff, so I'm kind of like, okay, anytime you're, you know, talking about some of your solo stuff, I'm not as interested, which is why I like some of his other ones, like In the Flesh, Us and Them, and Roger Waters' The Wall. I prefer those ones over this one, just within the song selection, but I also enjoy the fact that he is actually doing that. Like, he should be proud about the music that he's written. You know, he should be able to go on and sing the songs that he's recorded. You know, David Gilmore was doing a great job of that within his last two big releases. I know we've got another one coming up very soon that I'm excited for. But like, let's get some of his own stuff rather than having to lean on the stuff that he did 30, 40, 50 years ago. Along with that as well, I did feel as this, like everybody else in the band was doing a fantastic job, except the drummer. I felt like the drummer was struggling throughout the entire performance, and I just felt like that was the one sore thumb of the whole orchestration that's going on here. You know, he had 2 or 3 lead guitarists, he had a couple of backup bass players, he had a number of programmers and piano players and synthesizers, a number of brilliant vocalists and singers. All of those were fantastic and spectacular, and they really need to be applauded because they're playing some pretty complex and pretty insane music. But I just felt as if the drummer was the only one that was kind of lacking kind of the secret sauce that everybody else seemed to have. You know, it was like everybody was drinking Michael's secret sauce from Space Jam, and this guy got a couple of drops at the very end. So that was the one kind of sore thumb in terms of the musicianship that's found on here. Also, there were a couple of moments, because I've listened to the album and I've also seen the concert itself. There were a couple of moments where I'm like, okay, once again, subtlety, tact, you need to learn how to do that kind of stuff. You know, there's this one part where he's got text on these massive screens that he's got on there. And I did enjoy the actual stage construction. You know, it's theater in the round, and they have like this big T or X, depending on how you're looking at it. And so you've got this massive screen, and I really liked how the projections worked it on this one. I really thought that was such a good idea. Like, he took what he did with Us and Them, and then, like, even ballooned it even further. You know, balloons, because Roger Waters has a bunch of inflatables. But he's got text that scrolls on these screens every once in a while, kind of to help narrate the stage presence, you know, just to kind of narrate some of the underlying thoughts. And there were 2 in particular that I'm like, okay, guy, okay, like let's take a little bit of a seat, you know, check the ego before you walk in. The first one, and I honestly can't remember which one came first or which one didn't. I think the first one was literally when he was like, hey, in my early, you know, teenage, or in my late teenagehood, early 20s, I was hanging out with Syd Barrett, and Syd Barrett and I went to see the Rolling Stones, and coming out of that show, we decided to form Pink Floyd. And it's almost like him once again kind of doubling down and being like, Pink Floyd is me. Like, Syd Barrett's no longer here, and this was how he introduced Wish You Were Here, and basically just saying, remember, Pink Floyd is me. I'm Pink Floyd, right? All those other guys are not Pink Floyd. They did me dirty in the 80s when they refused to stop Pink Floyd when I didn't want to do Pink Floyd, even though Nick Mason has been within the band since its inception as well. But he's not really Pink Floyd because he didn't stand with me. He went with I almost said Peter Gabriel, you know, that's, again, those are some of the underlining text that was going on at that. And I'm like, oh man, that didn't need to be included. Like, you could have just said, hey, when Pink Floyd was formed and I was chatting with Sid, we decided that this is how we wanted it to be. And since he's not here, I really want to dedicate this song to him. You know, and I felt like that would have been a really good way of honoring Syd Barrett rather than saying, remember, Pink Floyd is Roger Waters, right? I'm like, well, this was a moment to honor your friend, not to double down and remind people of your importance within Pink Floyd's history. Like, The other one, if you really want to, you know, double down, was when he was introducing sheep. I have to be careful how I say that. And he's like, George Orwell was, you know, when I was writing Animals, George Orwell was a big influence, and this was my love letter to George Orwell with 1984. and Animals, and Huxley was, right when he wrote A Brave New World. So-and-so was right when he was delivering this speech about peace and whatnot. I honestly can't remember. And I was right when I wrote Sheep. And I'm like, my guy, come on. What? You're trying to compare yourself to Huxley. You're trying to compare yourself to George Orwell. And it's like, yeah, Sheep is a great song. It's a beautiful song. I would also include it as a masterpiece. But, like, I feel like more people know about George Orwell in 1984 as well as Animal Farm. Maybe less people know about A Brave New World. And I honestly forgot about that third person, if I'm being perfectly honest. But, like, to put yourself in the shoes of those guys, like, come on, man. This is where I'm like, check your ego at the door, my friend. Like, you aren't the one that gets to narrate your success in that side. Other people are the ones that should do that. And then you can point and say, haha, see? But yeah, I'm not seeing too many people being like, oh yeah, dystopian, forecasting of the future. We've got George Orwell, we've got Alex Huxley, and we've got Roger Waters. I think they would probably say Margaret Atwood first, if I'm being perfectly honest. So yeah. I'm all over the place with this one, and I apologize. The other thing that I want to mention is when we first started this whole thing, and it started with Comfortably Numb. Now, those in the know will know that, Roger Waters has like a love-hate relationship with Comfortably Numb, because most of it was written by David Gilmore. So very rarely will he play it outside of the context of The Wall. And so he starts the show off with Comfortably Numb, and he also plays a couple of other David Gilmour tracks from The Wall. But he does it in that stripped down, very quiet thing that he did with the lockdown sessions and the reduxed, the Dark Side of the Moon thing that he did. And the moment that he started playing that, I'm like, oh God, is he going to do the entire Wall as that whole Redux thing? And it's going to be like a friggin' 3 or 4 disc vinyl package, and it's going to be released in like 2 years. And this is him just being like, hey, look what's coming down the turnpike. I know how much everybody loved the Dark Side of the Moon redo that I did. And we're all like, no, man, don't. So I got some quick heart palpitations when I first heard that, but it was an interesting rendition. It's much more of an acoustic set, and I'm not sure if I appreciated it as much as everybody else in the theater did. Now, that also reminds me, when I was watching this, I was keeping an eye because they keep showing the crowd. And, at the very beginning, they're also, again, that voiceover was going. And Roger Waters comes out and he says, hey, could you, for the enjoyment of others as well as respect for the musicians, please turn off your cell phones and just enjoy the show. And then it shows the crowd literally during the first song of Comfortably Numb, and like half the crowd has their cell phones way up pointing and being like, look at this, I'm recording the whole show. And throughout the entire runtime, you're seeing the crowd and they've all got their cell phones out. And I'm like, well, yep, that tracks. Yeah. I mean, those are just some of my main thoughts about this record. Honestly, I wouldn't even really recommend this one if I'm being perfectly honest. And that even just goes beyond again, love the messaging. I think the messaging is very much on point. I think this is a message that needs to be heard right now of, human rights, of ceasefires, of, just basic human dignity. And I think that's all great. I just think the music doesn't quite interact with that messaging very well, and I think the music that's being played on here was done better on Us and Them, and I also think the messaging was done better on Us and Them as well. So, yeah. In the end, this was a fine track. This was fine. I think in every way it is a pale comparison to Us and Them, if I'm being honest. The song selection is a little bit weaker. The performances are a little bit weaker. And the messaging, I think it didn't quite hit the landing as much as I wanted it to. And yeah. So in the end, I will say, Roger Waters, This Is Not a Drill, live from Prague by Roger Waters, is an album that I would ultimately skip. Honestly, check out Us and Them. Like, I keep going back and leaning on that one for this review, but it's honestly the superior work in all shapes and forms. So, yeah, instead of checking this one out, if you haven't already checked out Us and Them, do so. It's a better piece in every respect of the word. And I think that's just where I'm going to leave you for today. What did you guys think about this record and this project? Have you seen the video? Have you listened to the album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know all about that by commenting down below. And yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave you for today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.